What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 150 of Nintendo Noise, Flipscreen Games weekly Nintendo podcast. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined today by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Steven Radford
Hello, hello.
and Miss Sierra Plus Ultra.
Yay!
We did it, gang. 150
150.
episodes.
Woo!
Still thriving out here, everybody. Thank you all so much for 150 episodes of Nintendo Noise. This has been a wonderful ride, and it has been an absolute pleasure to get together with my friends and all of you in the community every week to talk about Nintendo. And we have a fun episode planned for you today to mark that milestone. You know, recently, right, Nintendo Switch 2 conversation has been kind of dead, right? And we've been doing a lot of fun look backs at history. You know, we're doing some series retrospectives. So I thought to celebrate 150 episodes, let's shift gears and let's look forward again towards the future of Nintendo Switch 2. And I want to have us pitch our dream year one for Nintendo Switch 2. And I guess we'll say the successor to Nintendo Switch because we'll talk about that in a minute. But we've each come prepared with a list of a few games that we would love to see on the launch lineup, and then an official name, an official release date, and then any additional, flavor you want to bring to the branding, right? If you had an idea for like a tagline, like we would like to play, or the Switch sound, or something like that, right? We can pitch those ideas as well. And from there, I want to try to kind of take the best of each of our ideas and try to craft sort of an ultimate year one, right? What our ideal year one is for Nintendo Switch 2 here at Flipscreen.
Yeah, should be a good one. I'm excited. I've got some cool ideas, I think.
You're the tech guy, so I'm ready to hear what your crazy gimmicks are.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've got many crazy gimmicks that we haven't already spoken about. I feel like Nintendo's kind of shown their hand with some of the patents we talked about, like even on last week's episode of Nintendo Noise, where we spoke about some of the cool stuff that might be coming to the next versions of the Joy-Con and stuff. I feel like we'll know from that.
So you don't have any crazy. I'm half expecting you to be like, oh yeah, I threw this one's lowered,
Huh? Lowered?
Maybe that doesn't translate to British people. You ever seen Fast and the Furious, Steve, when the car's lowered?
Oh, yeah, okay,
I was wondering what you meant too. I was like, the price is lowered?
Crickets. No Fast and the Furious fans on this one. Okay, I got it. No problem.
Family.
Anyway, so I'm down to kind of start wherever, but I do feel like it makes the most sense to start with the name, right? Like that's the cornerstone. Does anybody have a pitch they're feeling particularly strong about leading with here?
I like my name. I like
Go for
my
it.
name. I think it should be called the Nintendo Snap. So we know that the Joy-Cons are going to be magnetic this time around, so they're not going to make that click noise. It's not going to resonate as well, but I think they'll probably snap on, and I feel like you could use something there.
Okay. That's interesting to me because like I know that the Switch sound is like it's a switch, but like they always represent it as a
click,
snap,
yeah.
right? So it's like it would be interesting. Like, how do you differentiate those sounds?
Yeah, I never really thought about that. Yeah, the sound is not. I don't think of a switch. When I think of a switch, I think of like a light switch, which is
and it doesn't sound like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Japanese light switches are different. We don't know. Maybe they're making a lot of noise. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that is one of the interesting like questions of the Nintendo Switch successor, right? Is like, how much of that branding do you keep consistent, and like, how do you make a different version of it that's as iconic, right, as something like that? So your idea is to kind of make it like it's like a red and blue thing. It's like the Switch and then the Snap. I think that's interesting.
I think so, because I think they're going to keep the current iteration of the Switch around, and I feel like to have it too similar, unless they go with the hard break and they just call it Switch 2, I think anything like Switch Pro, Super Switch, anything like that, in my eyes, is going to confuse people in the same way that the Wii and the Wii U confused people. It wasn't clear enough messaging. But I feel like Switch and Snap are similar enough that you kind of feel like they're in the same family of products, while also being different enough that they are clearly two different consoles.
Okay. How about you, Sierra?
So I'm really bad at naming things. So all I'm gonna say is like Nintendo Switch 2 really stuck with me, and it has been stuck in my head since like I heard rumors of a successor. It's just like, yeah, how do you beat the OG? Like
It's the obvious choice, yeah.
it's the obvious choice, like just build upon what you already got. And it's so the name is so ubiquitous, like Nintendo Switch. So however, building upon the fun banter we had going on in the server. And using human names to name things. I just
The
said
Nintendo Larry.
the Nintendo Switch Gym or something like that.
Nintendo
Just
James Switch.
I love giving human names to things that clearly don't need human names.
There's nothing
So,
like, an animal with, like, a very, like, adult person's name that always makes me laugh.
yes.
Mhm.
My cat's name
Yeah.
is Lucas, you know, right? Like, I think that's so
Yeah.
funny. He's just a tiny guy. What's he, like, a taxpayer? Come on.
Uh,
So, I also had Nintendo Switch 2 on my list. I had another one as an alternate, which was Super Nintendo Switch. And I
I was
do
thinking
think
of that
that,
too.
and it's like I do think that, like, I hear what you're saying, Steve, where there's a potential for brand confusion, but I do feel like you have that kind of precedent set by the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo, and the idea of not calling it like Super Switch being like, no, it is the Super Nintendo Switch, right? Like you really emphasize that the whole name is Super Nintendo Switch, and you try to move away
Yeah, I
from.
think the difficulty is like that's so close to like the SNES anyway. If you shorten that to SNS, it's like you're getting close
Yeah.
to it, and it's more tricky to say like, oh, where's my Switch? Can you see that anyway? I feel like people are just going to
That's the thing, though,
continue
you can
saying
still
that.
just call it a Switch
Yeah.
colloquially. You're not getting away from the Nintendo Switch branding, which is so powerful, you know? And I think, like, it's the same way where, like, I don't say, like, "Where's my PlayStation 5 controller?" Right? I'm like, "Oh, where's my PlayStation controller?" Right? It just
Right.
becomes the next one. And I'm, like, with Sierra where I genuinely I think the obvious choice is to call it the Nintendo Switch 2, but I think if for whatever reason they're hesitant to have a numbered console because 'cause they've never done that before, I think going for something like Super Nintendo Switch makes sense because it does
Mhm.
kind of show like, oh, it's the same form factor that you know and love, but it's more powerful, and it communicates that clearly, and I think, at least for the first couple of years where most of the games will probably be cross-platform, that's probably not that big of an issue.
No, it may be, but I do feel like it gets more confusing when there's certain accessories. So, like, oh, I need to buy new Joy Cons. What do I need Joy-Con for the Switch or the Super Nintendo Switch or the Switch 2? You know, like it then starts to become a little bit more confusing when there are two distinct things. Like, I need to get a new case. Well, if I need to get a new case for my phone, I know I've got like the iPhone 14 or whatever, so I
Sure.
look for a case for that one. I think they've got to obviously be careful with it. I feel like I'd be surprised if they didn't go with Switch 2, but it would be the first time that they've ever done that. Like, it would be the first time they've just kept the same name of the console and just tacked a number on the end of it. They've always come up with something unique and something distinct. Even with the 3DS, the new Nintendo 3DS rather than the 3DS 2 or the 3DS Plus or whatever, like they always do something weird with their names, and
I
I can't imagine that they'll do something straightforward this time around.
I do think it's a little interesting that, like, you brought up the Wii to the Wii U thing and, like, how that ended up being a branding problem that people didn't really understand, and I've always found that to be very interesting because it's, like, literally the only example of that being true, right? Like, it was the NES, then the Super NES, it was the Game Boy Advance, the N64 to the GameCube is literally the only handoff of consoles aside from the Wii U to the Switch where there isn't a follow-up of the naming convention at least once, you know?
Yeah, like even on the Game Boy, we had Game Boy, Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance.
And that was never, like, a problem, right? Like, people were able to understand that, and it wasn't like
Mm.
this confusing marketing problem. And it's interesting to me that like it like was the problem with the Wii U the name or the fact that like they marketed the product poorly, right?
I
And
think
it
it's
was
probably a little bit of both, but I do think the name was really weak. It made no sense. It made absolutely no sense when they pitched it, and still think people are confused by it now. People are like, "Oh, that's that iPad thing you can buy for your Wii."
yep. Yeah. But I don't think this will have that problem, right? It's like I think it'll be way easier to just pitch this as like it's a more powerful Nintendo Switch. And there's never been like a pro model that's like a half step. So it is very like, oh, okay. Like this is the next one. Got it. Right. Like I think no matter what
Mhm.
it's called, they have an easier time of that rather than, you know, I guess this kind of like issue they ran into there where it's like, is this tablet a peripheral for this console that was very well known for having peripherals, or
Yeah.
is this a new thing? Right. Whereas like this is going to very clearly be a new model of the Switch, regardless of what they call it.
Yeah, and unless they call it something completely different, they might come out and call it something else.
Yeah. I mean, they could. I think that would just be so crazy though,
Me
considering
too.
like how powerful the Switch branding is. I think it's like, probably the most individually powerful brand they've ever had, save for maybe the Wii, right? Which was like so iconic, right? It got everybody's grandma to play Wii bowling and everything, right? Like that was such a
I think
moment.
Game Boy was a really massive brand as well. Like
That's
everyone was
true.
just like, "Oh, there's your Game Boy," and like people used to call any kind of handheld a Game Boy. Like a PSP was a Game
Yeah.
Boy.
That's probably why they made like 18 of them too, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So we'll go circle back to the name conversation, but it sounds like we have a front runner between it. So I guess I'll start with my release date. I'm suggesting March 7th, which is
Hmm.
the first Friday in March. That's the same release that the original Switch had, and I think there's a lot of benefit to that for a few reasons. I think there's like kind of the obvious like cyclical nature of things, right? Like if you are very much being like, this is a hard successor to our last console, and you really want to have that continuity, being like, hey, like we're celebrating the, 8 or what, this will be 8 years, right? Of Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, it
This
will
last
be
year,
8
7.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So celebrating like 8 years of Nintendo Switch, right? Like having them have like a similar kind of timeline, I think, around that anniversary is something that like I think could just make sense, like as a marketing beat, but also I think that's just a good time to release a consumer product like that, I think, in my opinion. Because if you look at the success of the original Switch, right? You had it come out and it was a really hotly desired product and it was hard to get one for a while. And, it was a thing you had to actively be looking for to get your hands on it. And there was a really big launch game, right, in Breath of the Wild that dominated the conversation. And then you had the entire like first 6 months of it being a new platform where that was kind of the conversation was, oh my God, the Switch is incredible. Have you gotten one? Like, have you been able to find one? Are you playing Breath of the Wild? And that sustained that conversation. And then when it was time for them to have another beat later in the year, right? You have kind of the next wave of big games with like Odyssey and, like obviously Splatoon and everything came in that in between period to kind of tide people over. But you had another big push with Mario and the holiday season, and you got all the bundles, and you got Black Friday deals, and and it gives you this opportunity to have two big major sales pushes in the first year of the device's launch, right? And if everything we've heard about their kind of desire to shore up software, and have like a really steady output, you want to get that thing out as early as you can so that you can have, okay, well, this is the big game at the beginning of the year. This is the big game of the summer. This is the big game of the fall. This is the big game that we're pushing at the holiday season. And just have like these really, you know, big releases that are really impossible to ignore that everyone's talking about, that you can, maybe try to find a nice deal for your kid or for yourself in the holiday season. I think it just like that blueprint for success seems so clear with how well they handled it with Nintendo Switch that I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to do everything you can to replicate what worked about that. And I don't think that that was a, unique to the Nintendo Switch being a good product success. I think it was genuinely very, very smart to put out the game of the year, right? At a time when there was not a lot of competition and everybody was happy for something new to play. So they would buy this, cheap handheld and jump into the ecosystem because they didn't want to miss out. And I think that's exactly what they should be trying to do again here in March.
So I flip-flopped around this. I thought maybe they would release it later in the year, try and capitalize on the holiday sales, but I came to the same conclusion as you that it should come earlier in the year, not least because GTA 6 is due out next year, and that's probably going to be dominating the back half of the year anyway, so they don't want to be kind of in the mix with that. I don't think it's coming in March. Their financial year ends in March, and I think if it was coming in March, they would have had to put that in their projections that they would have
Oh,
been
true.
making sales in March. So I think it's probably coming in April. I've picked the last Friday in April, which is April
Didn't they say it was going to
25th.
release by the end of this fiscal year, though?
No, they said they would announce it by the end of this fiscal year.
Ah, okay.
So I
Okay.
could see them
Interesting.
announcing it in January. We have like a 3-month period where everyone kind of hypes up pre-orders, and then it lands in April.
I also said April, but I said the first Friday, but for the same reason, like Japan's fiscal year starts April 2025, so kick it off with a bang.
I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm happy to lock that one in, frankly. I feel like to me, I think Sierra's date makes the most sense. I think it
Mhm.
splits the difference between the three ideas, and I think that's the earliest time you can do it and have it be in that fiscal quarter. Then yeah, like that's probably the date, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
sweet.
that's what I would do anyway. Okay, cool.
Cool.
How
All right.
much do we think it's going to be?
Ooh, I didn't
We
write down
didn't think about that.
Because I
Okay.
think it's
I thi
$429.
I think it's 400. I think it's
I'm with
gonna be 400.
I'm with Sierra. I don't think it can be more than $400.
Mm.
Um,
And I think maybe they have multiple SKUs this time around.
I don't think so. Not at launch. Because like I'm thinking back to the Wii U and that multiple SKU, and you had that point where it was like you could fucking any store you could go into, they had the cheaper version with less memory because nobody wanted it. And I feel like the most success they've had with iterating on consoles always comes from releasing the original form factor that could be the only form factor, right? Because it's well designed enough and affordable enough and at a good, price point, not just for the consumer,
Mhm.
but for their margin. And then iterating later on to meet like specific niches of the audience, right? Like whether that's the more child-friendly Switch Lite or the more, you know, tech enthusiast OLED, right? Like I imagine they would follow a similar trajectory to that. That's what they did with Game Boy Advance. That's what they did with Game Boy Color or Game Boy Original, I guess I should say, to Game Boy Color. Um, I just feel like that makes sense to me. And I think if it's more than $400, I think you get into it's too expensive.
I disagree. I think it's $429. It's still $70 cheaper than a PS5 and an Xbox Series X at $500. And I think it puts you around the same price as a Steam Deck, which is probably going to have similar power to. And we've also got the additional sales force of the fact that this is the only place you can play Nintendo games. You launch with some banger titles, and it's a good place to play it. Maybe they do like a package deal or something where you can like buy it, you get like a buying game or something. I think games are going up to $70 as well.
I
So I
definitely
think
think that's the case, but I think that to me is how you get to that price point. I think if you buy the console by itself, it's probably $400 or less, and if you buy a package that has a game and
mm.
maybe a case or whatever, that kind of extra set of Joy-Cons, that's how they get you to that
See,
higher
I
price
think I
point.
think they want it to be 500, but they know they can't do it. So you do it 429. The $70 game brings you up to that $500
I
price
just
point.
I guess I'm confused as to why you think it'll cost that much. Because like if we're basing it based on what we know about the technology, right? Like it's like it should be on par with what like a PS4, right? It's like that's very old tech at this point. I think it's for I see them being able to hit a similarly surprisingly low price point as they did with Switch because they're going to be banking on using older technology.
So the OLED model retails for what, 350?
I believe that's right. Yeah.
I can't see that they say this is only $50 more, and it's also way more powerful We've got the new magnetic Joy-Cons with all the tech that we've included in there. It's probably got a bigger screen. It can
I
play
mean,
all these other games,
I'm
and it can play
imagining
all
that
of your
those get
Switch
a price
games
cut.
up-res. I don't think they do price cut them. I think they keep that at the same price and they make this one $429 or even $449.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like that's so antithetical to like how Nintendo.
The Switch has never had a price cut. Even when the
Right. So
OLED
what
model
better
came
time
out,
than now?
but even when the OLED model came out, they didn't price cut the old one. They just kept it around.
But I think that's because of demand, right? Like it had an unprecedented level of demand for a console this deep in its life cycle. And I
Mhm.
think that when you have a new model out, that's gonna see a decline. It's already declining, right? Like we're already seeing the sales finally start to plateau and now decline. So I think the idea that when a new model comes out, that everyone's gonna be excited about the shiny new toy, and oh my god, isn't it great that it's only $400? Is a very attractive price point. And then I think for anybody who's on the fence, right, or wants to be a late adopter, maybe they want to get an extra one for a younger kid or whatever, great. Like you're going to probably see that whole scale of consoles come down in price the same way we did with the 3DS, where by the end of its life cycle, you could get a 2DS for like $75, you know? Um,
I think if they're keeping it and they're calling it the Switch, they're not going to want to devalue the old product. I think they probably bin off the old model, and if that finally goes, the LCD version, they keep the OLED model around, and then the Switch too. I mean, rumors are that this doesn't have an OLED model, so maybe it is $399 at launch, and then maybe there is an OLED model we don't know about, and that's the additional SKU. It's like if you want one with an OLED screen, you're paying more. You're paying $499 instead of $400.
I think that'll come later, personally, but I mean, who knows? You could be right. What do you
But
think,
I
Sierra?
Yeah, because if it doesn't have an OLED screen, it better be $400.
Yeah, like what?
And
Why is it $500 if not for that, right?
yeah.
There's the extra tech in the Joy-Cons. Like they're talking about those resistive sticks that are like have the magnetic fluid in them. They attach with magnets to the device. We've potentially got newer chips in there that are going to cost more to make, a smaller nanometer process. I I don't know. I mean, maybe they take a loss on it for the first time. Maybe they do make it a $399. But I don't know. Unless they know they're going to sell fucking shitloads of these, which they probably do, and they can make it a lower price point. But like $429 is what? That's the same price as like the cheapest Steam Deck, or is that $399 now?
I think you're right. I think it's 4. But I think that's the thing is I think they wanna have the cheapest console on the market. I think that's a huge part of their
yeah,
appeal.
I feel
But
like
they already don't. The Series S is cheaper.
Sierra, go ahead.
I feel like they don't see this like the Switch as like a Steam Deck equivalent already. So like I don't know if it's ever gonna get there. And so I would be I mean like we haven't seen anything else really come out tech spec wise. So like I don't know how I feel if they came out and were like or you know sticking to this 429 price point. Like and I'm like, is it really worth that? Like at launch? I don't know. I don't know. But like I don't want to completely write it off either because
I
I studio reasoning, Steve, like I totally see how that's feasible as well. So
I feel like you're right that that's a high enough price point to make people, like, balk, you know, and be
yeah.
like, "Ooh, that's a little pricey." And, like, and I think that's what they wanna avoid, right? Like, I think the idea that you wanna come in at the maximum price you can charge before people are like, "Whoa, I have to think about that," you know? And I think $300 was an extremely small ask. The 3DS launched at 350, like, what, 6 years earlier, right? Like, think about that, you know?
Yeah, but with
Did it
inflation,
really?
that's
Oof.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's like a $550 console with inflation. It's like
That's
insane.
right. That's my point though. And that didn't work. And I think that I do think that charging the same amount for a Nintendo console as you do like a PlayStation is just like I think it reads poorly because they're not comparable when it
But
comes
what
to
if they
power.
are comparable in terms of power? Because we're forgetting that this has NVIDIA's tech in it. Yes, it may be on paper a less powerful device, but we've seen what DLSS can do on PCs. It
Yeah,
can
with
take a
regards for
visual
upscaling and
that's
everything.
720p and it can output a 4K image. If we can get the same games that are running on a PS5 or an Xbox that can run on the Switch too, why would Nintendo not want to charge the same price? Because you're getting the same experience but in a handheld form
I
factor
mean,
that you can
I
take
think then
anywhere you go.
I think it comes back to value then. that like I think that they believe that they will sell more consoles if it's cheaper than presenting themselves as like, oh, it's premium. This is a premium product that you need to spend a premium price for. That's not their bag, right? Like, not to say that their consoles are not high quality, but I think that they've always been very much like, we're not going to chase cutting edge technology or, the highest graphical benchmarks or whatever, because that drives up the cost for our consumers. And our consumers don't care about that as much as they care about high quality games. And I just don't see them doubling down on tech in that way. If it's at the expense of the consumer, right? Like if it's passing that cost on to them, I don't see that as a decision that to me seems like makes sense with their history. And the times that they have done that, right? Like we just talked about, like with the 3DS, it bit them in the ass. And they had to give it a massive price cut and come up with that whole ambassador program and everything. And like, basically like tail between their legs, be like, sorry, it was too much. Here it is now at a better price. And I just don't think they want to repeat that mistake. Look at how successful the Switch has been, and they've never cut the price because the price at launch was extremely fair. And even now, 7 years later, it's not a bad deal. And I think if they can, lock this one in at or even 350, right? And then all the other ones come down.
There's no chance on earth this comes out at the same price as the current model. I cannot see that.
I don't know. I mean, literally the only thing that I would push back on that, right, is that the technology, like the profit margins on Nintendo Switch have only gotten better over time. Right? Like it was already, they sold it at a profit when it launched. Now 7-8 years later, right? Like those parts all cost less to make. So like with that in mind, like they've only had better profitability over the course of the life cycle of the device. So, I mean, they are sitting on a huge amount of cash, and like the idea that they could sell it even at a slight loss, right? Like say that instead of it being totally profitable day and date, right, to achieve and selling it at 500, they sell it at 450, and then they know that you will buy at least one $70 game, and they're up $20 in profit no matter what. And then they know that within the first few years of the console's life cycle, the parts will become cheaper and they'll achieve a better rate of profitability.
Yeah, and I can totally see that. That's why I settled on 429. It's 400. I think they want it to be 500. I don't think they will charge 500, but I think 429 plus a $70 boxed game gets them that $500 sale that they want on day one.
Okay.
But if you guys are dead set on 400 or 399, I'm fine to go with.
That's the thing, I don't know.
I think we can let's stew on this one like we are the name, and we'll circle back because
I'm always the middle of the road, Marty. I can't make up my mind. I can't. So many great points have been proposed. I simply cannot pick one. But
Nintendo Marty, is that maybe we throw that?
Honestly, in my perfect little world, the Nintendo Switch is 400 because I can't afford any more than that. But
I really feel like that's a good price point. Like that's what the PlayStation 4 cost at launch, like what, 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was 10 years ago, but add inflation on now it's like a $500 console.
Right, but the technological framework is the same, right? So like the parts that it would.
It's not though, because it's like it's a
new
different
chipset.
system on a chip.
True.
It's ARM based, not x86 based.
Yeah.
It's got an SSD in there, not an old hard drive.
Yeah. All right. I don't know.
And we've got to include a screen and 2 controllers that attach magnetically. We've got to put a USB-C charger in the box. I mean, there are some things they could do to lower the price point. Maybe it works with the current dock and they don't have to sell you another one of those, and you can just buy the console and you can use your current dock. Maybe
I think that would be a really good idea if they can do that. I think that would be very attractive to people that are already in the ecosystem.
But I could also see Nintendo doing like a trade-in scheme. It's like, sell us your Switch back and we'll give you like $150 off and here's your new console.
Nah, no. They don't want to do that. They're gonna be like, you keep it. You're still valuable.
Yeah, you keep it. We're sick of those drifting Joy-Cons.
Yeah, we're not fixing those anymore.
Oh yeah, what do you think the dock is gonna look like? Not to tack on more bullet points.
No, please tack on as many bullet points as you want. This is episode 150. We're taking our time.
I really hope it doesn't have a front bit to it. I want to see the screen.
Yes. Yes, I was just thinking the same thing. Like it slides in, and it's on like a slight angle, and
I like don't
it
want
looks
it.
really
Yeah,
sleek.
I always am like afraid I'm gonna scratch the screen. So it's like I would love
Because
to
people
like.
did on day
Listen, that
one. Do
was
you
a thing.
remember?
That was a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, that was a thing. It never happened to me, but
I always
probably
get a
because
screen protector.
it's like once you're like aware of it, it's very easy to just be like, okay, like just pay attention. But it's like it would be nice if that was not a fucking problem, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Like I think design wise, like I don't think it needs to change that much, frankly. Like I think the OLED dock, like the updates they made to that were pretty good. Like it has the cutout in the back for like running wires more easily. It, has the built-in internet like for LAN cables to plugged in. Like I feel like those are like the big things. Like unless we're like looking at a version of it that has some kind of like, you know, external GPU, like people have talked about, where like you plug it in and that allows it to upscale.
Just
But like
yeah, I
it
didn't
just
see
doesn't seem
that.
like that's
No.
realistic. And that would be something that would drive up the price, which again, we talked about why that doesn't seem likely. So yeah, I mean, I think if it's a slightly smaller footprint and no front on it, like that sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any thoughts on like a tagline or anything?
Only my Snap, Nintendo Snap. We have a different sound. That was the only thing I had.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with one. I was trying to like
They don't even
think
have
of
one for the Switch though, do they? It's just that click sound.
no. No, it was just the snap. And that's like the snap's so iconic. It's like I feel like you need something that is on that level and I just don't know what it is. I don't know how you match that.
I mean, they've
And
done
you
it for a few of their consoles. Like the DS was that. Dun-dun, dun-dun, dun-dun.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. They just got to come up with a new noise. But
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah,
what is that? And I don't
yeah.
know, maybe there's a gimmick, right, to it that like we don't know about yet and like that's, you get some other kind of like, oh, like you said, like it is like like it makes a sound when the Joy-Cons like snap on or something.
That's my guess. Is it makes some kind of sound? Yeah, like they attach a magnet, so
A
like
new a new iconic sound.
Yeah. I think that's the move.
Yeah, because
Personally.
my tagline is just "Stop tweeting us." I don't have it.
I love
It's
that.
so
That's great.
serious. Stop tweeting.
All right. Let's jump into our games list, gang. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the Nintendo Noise Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of July, some of which have been with us since the very, very beginning of the show. For the last time this month, they are Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Tyler Dude, Voodoo Vic, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go check out our sister shows like the Flip Screen Games podcast, the Steam Deck podcast, both of which have had some really killer episodes these last couple of weeks, make sure you go check them out. We just celebrated 150 episodes over on the Flip Screen Games podcast, and we had a nice special over there about the 100 games that you should play before you die. So go check that out if you haven't already. It was a good time, and I think it's a good episode. I am ready to pitch some games here, but remember, flipscreen.games. That's the website. However you want to get involved, show your support, or be a member of the community. We thank you oh so much for tuning in and for your support over 150 glorious episodes of Nintendo Noise.
So,
All right.
should we lock in the games we know that are coming next year? Metroid Prime 4, Pokemon Legends, ZA, or whatever they call them
Yeah.
now.
Sure. Yeah, I'm down with that. I have both of those on my list. Steve, can you run the list in the show doc
Mhm.
for this one? Thank you. Yeah, I'm down with that. I think that makes sense. I had both of those on my list. Did you both have them on your list?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so I think those are locked in for sure. Did anybody else have another game that they think might be on somebody else's list?
Well, I think Mario Kart 9 is for me one that I think could launch next year,
That
or
one's
I
on
would
mine
like
as well.
to launch.
And that's the thing is we had some reporting that like made us think it maybe is not a launch title, but then the console seemingly got delayed. So maybe it could be a launch window game now.
I think that's their big holiday game. You know, it's like you
We
pick
love
up
a Mario Kart bundle.
exactly. You pick up a Switch 2, you pick up Mario Kart 9, you pick up an extra set of Joy-Cons, or you use the ones you've already got. with the new charging dock that we spoke about last week, and you have a great time in Mario Kart 9. I don't know what the new gimmick's going to be for this though, other than it looks nicer, more realistic.
I don't know. I think the thing that makes the most sense to me is something that I know is like a very like fan kind of, or like a lot of fans have said this, so maybe I'm setting myself up for disappointment. But I feel like the easiest thing to do is just expand the roster to be other non-Mario characters and not introduce a new gimmick, and just introduce more content and take all of the content that was in Deluxe, include that, and then also add another full game's worth of tracks and get like, some more iconic characters in there, and have levels based on more Zelda games or Animal Crossing or whatever,
Yeah, I love the
right?
Animal Crossing levels, my favorite.
Yeah.
They're great, and like there's already stuff like that. There's the Excite Bike level, there's the Big Blue from F-Zero. I feel like just doing more of that, and like adding more stuff that's just like, these are fun, dynamic, interesting levels, and fun new characters that like mix it up a little bit. I think that's a really simple solution to up the ante without reinventing the wheel.
Maybe they do some new multiplayer modes though, because I do think we could do something that I could see them doing like a battle royale style mode. Bring over
Maybe a
some of
season
the
pass, like maybe you have
yeah.
some kind of like, games as a service like we got with the DLC um plan for this one, but you have that baked in from the beginning. Okay. Anybody got another one that they think might be on somebody else's list?
No.
Okay, that's
Donkey Kong?
exciting.
Well,
Donkey
I
Kong?
Okay, I do have Donkey Kong on mine. I
Okay.
I wrote a new 3D Donkey Kong. I think it could just as easily be a 2D Donkey Kong, but like
Mm,
there was that report years ago now that they had started a new internal team at, I think, EAD, that was supposed to be developing new Donkey Kong projects, and nothing's
okay.
ever come from that.
Mm,
see. I struggle with a new Donkey Kong because Donkey Kong Country Returns HD's coming out, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean,
more.
yeah,
Do
I
we
mean
do
that's the
we do
thing though.
more Donkey Kong in the same year? Maybe.
I don't think it's crazy, because I mean, you think about like we just had the Famicom Detective Club remake last year. Now we're getting a new one this year. If we get Donkey Kong Country, returns this year, and
No, that's in
then
January. It's coming out.
oh, okay. Well, I
It'll
think if
just
it's a
be the
3D
year of
Donkey,
Donkey Kong.
I don't think it's that crazy. I mean, we haven't had a 3D Donkey Kong since 64, right? And he's a character and a setting that they're trying to push as like, an A-list character. He's gonna have his own movie. He's got the theme park ride
Well,
coming
yeah,
out
when's
this
the
year.
theme park opening?
I think it's open in Japan. I think it's opening in Florida in 2025.
Then
So,
maybe that is a good time for it then. Yeah.
and again, it's just like the time that story broke was when you and I were back at Loot Pods, So it's like we know, or maybe it's
But it
possible
also
that
could
the
have been
rumor was
cancelled.
wrong.
It could have been
That's true.
cancelled, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it feels odd to me that they would go through the trouble of doing a redesign of Donkey Kong, of having him be a prominent character in a movie, and then getting his own solo movie, having a theme park ride and a whole section of the park based off of him, and not have a new game coming up, right? Like, yeah, it's great that they have a re-release of this older game that is
They
really
did the
good.
they did the exact same thing with the Super Mario movie. We didn't get a new Super Mario game
We got Super Mario
alongside it.
Wonder a year later, though.
Yeah, it was a year later, but it's not
Yeah, but
like
think about it. That movie came out. So my point is that like if you're investing in the IP, right, and
mhm.
you're trying to raise the profile of the character, wouldn't you want to have a game out? Like they did that with Peach, right? Like they evolved her character and made her a leading lady, and then literally the next year she got a game. I feel like, and she was in Wonder, right? I feel like that's, like partly because you want to be like, hey, there's all of these young girls who are, 10 or younger that just saw the Mario movie and liked Peach, and now they get a game that they can go and pick up and continue that engagement with the character. I think that's, I don't think that it's like because there's a movie, there has to be a tie-in, but it does feel to me that like if they made a team to make more Donkey Kong games and they've made all these things that are trying to make Donkey Kong more visible, why wouldn't there be a new starring game coming out, especially when you're re-releasing old games? Like we've seen them do that a lot where they re-release an old title in anticipation of a new
Yeah.
game in the
Yeah, you're
franchise.
right. I think we're more likely to get a 3D Mario, and I don't know that they do a 3D Donkey Kong and a 3D Mario in the same year.
I have that on my list too, and I think that that is a relevant consideration. I think if one comes next year, then the other one is probably either maybe the following year or a couple years away. Like, that could definitely be the
Because
case.
it's been 8 it'll be 8 years next year since we had a 3D Mario. I think we're due one. If you count Bowser's Fury, sure, we had, like, that little interim game, but I don't think you really can. My pitch for it is this is called Super Mario World, and it's an open world 3D Mario game in the style of Bowser's Fury that you can basically go anywhere and you can explore the whole world. But
New
whether they
Super Mario World.
Yeah, new Super Mario World, there you go. Something like that, where it's like they're following on from what they learned and what they explored in Bowser's Fury.
I like that idea, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I had that on my list as well. I think we're overdue, and for the same reasons, right? Like, Mario's on the rise. Why wouldn't you want to get a 3D game out?
I have a 3D game, but it's a sequel to Odyssey.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I So I'm having an internal debate here because initially I'm like, well, if they were going to do that, I feel like they would have done it sooner. But tying back to like my point earlier about like, oh, like 8 years of Nintendo Switch, that could be, Nintendo Switch 2, Super Mario Odyssey 2. Like, I don't know. You,
Right.
you could do that. That would be
Yeah.
cool. I don't
But
think
it could
anybody
also
would be
end up
disappointed about that.
totally. But it also could end up just being the open world Mario thing. Either one.
I think a version of that idea is happening eventually, right? Like that game felt like a test for something bigger in the future. But I don't know. It's interesting. How do we feel about Zelda? Because I had Wind Waker HD this might be a good time to port that
Uh,
Or do they just call
because
it Wind Waker 4K at this point? Because this
yeah,
feels gonna be
you could.
it better be.
Just because I'm trying to think of like we have the Zelda game coming out this year, right? But I have to imagine they want a Zelda game at launch on the new console. The idea that Grezzo has like another top-down Zelda ready to go, I think is unlikely. So I mean, why not do this now, right? Like,
I don't think they bother personally. I think they say, you know what, the two of the best Zelda games in recent memory were both on the Switch. You can now play them at 4K 60 frames per second on the new Switch. Go ahead, replay them. Maybe here's a bit of DLC for Tears of the Kingdom instead to kind of tide you over because we have not heard anything about any DLC coming for that game. I don't know that there's any planned, but they could potentially do something like that instead. I think it's too soon for another Zelda game, personally. If we've just got a 2D Zelda game this year,
later in the
we had a
year,
3D
though.
Zelda game last year.
If you put that out in like the late summer, early fall as like a filler kind of experience, I mean, that's a year removed. Is that crazy?
Hmm.
Because I think my issue with the idea of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom at a higher frame rate is like, what does that look like? Like, is that something you pay for? Is it like a
No, I don't think it's something you pay for. I think it's your game's work, and they're in this boost
sure,
mode.
but then it's not a release.
No, yeah, and that's why I don't think they have a release because I think part of the pitch of the console is going to be your Switch games play better than they ever have before. They all play now in 4K. They've got higher frame rates. You don't need to buy these games again. You've already bought them before, and we're not going to charge you any extra for it. And maybe some publishers charge extra for it, but I don't think Nintendo will be.
What do you think, Sierra?
I think a Wind Waker is unlikely. I feel like they would have done it by now, like the HD remake, because Zelda had that anniversary year, and like I really thought that was gonna be a year we were gonna get both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess,
Yeah.
and didn't. So, on the other hand, I feel like they're going to slowly crank out remasters of GameCube games over time, but the rate to which they'll do that, it's really hard to predict. Um,
It's weird to me that they don't do more remakes, honestly. Like, it feels like it would be such a slam dunk for them to do like a what if we did Mario 64 in the Odyssey engine? What if we did Ocarina? And again, like not even make major changes, just make them look new. I really feel like those would sell so exceptionally well in the same way that something like The Last of Us, part one remastered sells really well because it's like, yeah, like of course people are gonna buy this nostalgia
Well, yeah,
play.
or the
And
Crash
yeah.
Bandicoot collection, right?
yeah,
It did
right.
so well.
And it's like, why wouldn't you want to get in on that? You know, like it seems crazy to me that there's like not a more modern way to play Ocarina of Time than the 3DS one,
That's
which
my
is
thing, like,
old.
why wouldn't they have done it, like, in such a slow year for the Switch? I feel like it
Yeah.
would've been so cool if, like, 2023, they announced it, came in 2024, and then clean slate for Switch 2
I mean,
or
I, I
whatever it is.
I guess maybe there's the argument to be made that they just did them in order, right? Because there was the Wind Waker one that came out, and then there was the Twilight Princess one, and then Skyward Sword came out. Like that's the same order that those games released in. So maybe they were just working on Skyward Sword, and it's like, okay, well, that's the next one we have ready to put out, and it's like they're just sitting on like I have to imagine they will re-release them at some point, right? But like you make a good point of like, well, why the hell haven't they done it yet? It's like one of the
Right.
only games on Wii U that you can't play on Switch.
Maybe they're not planning on re-releasing the remasters. Maybe they're doing something new with it, something we don't expect. Maybe they're just gonna remake it again.
I mean, I I
I
think
know,
that
because
would
I
be
guess none of us saw Thousand Year Door coming.
right. It's
No
true.
one no one could have called that one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It does feel like something that's underdeveloped, right? Aside from like Link's Awakening, like what's the last like major? I mean, I guess Thousand Year Door and Paper Mario are both good examples, but I'm thinking of Zelda. Um,
Totally.
yeah, I don't know. I'm down to table Zelda for right now since it seems like we're not in total agreement.
We'll keep it on the list. I think we keep everything that we pitch on the list, and then we can figure out the kind of master list at the end.
Yeah, because my thing
Okay.
is, like, I don't have a lot of you'll see what I mean. I don't have
All right, hit us
I
with
have
another one.
I have some strong suggestions. I have some that I'm not totally, like, clear on, I know I want the IP, but I don't know what it looks like.
Okay.
So, like,
We can workshop.
there's definitely space to move things around. Let's see. I think we're doing just, like, one and going around, right? I think,
Yeah,
like, a new Yoshi platformer. It's been a while since,
I have that too.
Crafted World in 2019, so it would make sense to me if there was a new 2D platformer in the launch year, at
I
least
think
to
I
me.
think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it checks a couple boxes to me, right? We had that teaser at the end of the Mario movie that like, was like pointing towards Yoshi connection, right? So seemingly Yoshi's going to be a voiced character in the new movie, so like that hits that like synergy point. I think a smaller like 2D side scroller like something like Kirby Star Allies or again like Yoshi's Crafted World, like those were early launch titles that filled in some of the like smaller release beats, like those more like double A kind of experiences that cost less to make and less to market and, just have different expectations on them. Yeah. And again, it's been how long? It's been like 6 years since a Yoshi game. I just think that all makes sense. It all makes too much sense for me to think that we won't get something.
Yeah.
Even if it's a remake, like you could do a Yoshi's Island remake. You could do something like that in
I
the
think people would love that. I've heard some people, like, say they want another Yoshi's Island. There's something to that extent.
yeah.
I'm down.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also think it's like there's been a few of them that were not super well received. So the idea of having like, okay, like this is the good one. This is the one that brings it back, in the same way that like Kirby and the Forgotten Land was like, oh yo, like this is the best
Mhm.
Kirby game in a long time. Even if the other ones were not bad, they were mid, right? And like this was like this one's great. I
Yeah.
think we're overdue for that with Yoshi.
Mhm.
I've got an Animal Crossing spin-off on my list because I don't think we're gonna get another Animal Crossing
Mm.
game.
Too soon, yeah.
I've got
Yeah.
like a couple of ideas. One is like a narrative-driven game where there's like more of a story to it. The other is you run Nook's Cranny, and that's your job to kind of get products in and manage the store, and it's more of like a managerial thing. But I think there's going to be something Animal Crossing in the
Do
launch
you
year. It's too big of an IP for them to ignore.
do you envision that as like its own game or is that DLC?
No, its own game. I think it's its own thing.
Okay. I think that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected them to do Animal Crossing spinoffs like when they did do them. So like I feel like it makes a lot more sense to try something like that now that the IP is so much bigger and more established. I do think probably you could win over some people with something like that. And not having it like be connected to the main game like puts less onus on you to like get back into something that you'd put down, which
Yeah,
is
it's like
Yeah.
the whole separate thing, I think, because I think that was a lot of my problems with Happy Home Paradise was just like I just hated my island at that point. I wanted to completely raise it, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it because it was like a
yeah,
time capsule for 2020.
totally.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. My next one is I want to see Earthbound remastered. I think I think this is just like such a slam dunk for a lot of reasons, right? Like I think that we've seen multiple games on the Switch now over the last couple of years that have done exactly what this game would need, right? I think Link's Awakening and Super Mario RPG were both really good examples of how you take a game that was developed for, an older kind of console that has a pixel art style that has these very small models and how you kind of reimagine it in a modern way and do very little to change the mechanics aside from throwing in some quality of life changes, like more frequent save points, stuff like that. Just the stuff that's going to make the game less frustrating to play as a new player in 2024 and, have somebody with that kind of attention to style like Grezzo or like the team at Square that did RPG and lean into that kind of like toy box diorama like style and yeah, right, like I mean it just had an anniversary. This is a constant request to the point where it's a joke that Nintendo themselves have acknowledged, right? Like they have translations of these games. They've brought them over. They've made them somewhat more available. I think this is the next step to kind of like wring as much value as you can out of that IP that you could make some money off of, and also potentially get new people into it for the first time because you're not ever going to get a new Mother game, right? The only thing you can do is repackage them and re-release them. And I think doing that for the HD era and then having a definitive version of it that is translated for all regions and from now on, if people want to play Mother, this is how you do it. And there's, you do the whole trilogy over time. But I think you start with Earthbound because it's, that's the one that everyone knows.
I struggle with this one because the anniversary is this year. It's next month. It's the 27th of August. And I feel like if they were going to do this, it would have been for that. For them to miss it would seem really strange to me. But maybe it was ready for the Switch 2 and the Switch 2 got pushed, so maybe they do push the game.
That's my hope. I know that this one is kind of like out there, but I think it's just one of those things that like it just makes so much sense to me in the same way that like a sequel to Pokemon Snap made so much sense to me. And it's like, why did it take so long to even attempt this?
No, I know.
And when they have a studio like Grezzo that did such a good job with Awakening, it's like, yeah, like why can we not just copy this formula, this style and, just properly adapt it to Earthbound?
It's one of those Nintendo hates us things. It's like, why? It's we're giving you a slam dunk. Like, not trying to tell you how to run your business, but like it's clear that people want this and it's taken years.
Like, if you're making jokes about it in an E3 presentation, it's like, maybe you should just do it. Like, right? Like,
Really. I know.
we've been asking for this for how long, right? Like, I don't know. To me, it seems like an easy slam dunk, and given that they have done exactly this with several retro RPGs over the last, 2 or 3 years, it's like, why not? Why not this one?
I'd say if they don't do it next year, then it gets announced next year.
I
But
hope so.
it would be nice.
That would be
It'd be
so cool.
nice.
And it's like, like you've got like all these contacts at Square, right? It's like they've done this really well. The 2D HD, like I don't know, outsource it if you need to. Just get it done. Ooh, there was that story, Sierra, that we talked about earlier this year about them partnering with 3 studios to work on their IP. This would be a fun one if it was
Oh
like, oh,
yeah. Yeah.
Square's doing it. Okay, great, awesome, sounds good. Okay, what about you? Got another one, Sierra?
I have a left field one.
Hit us.
New Wave Racer. Bringing back
Nice.
Yes.
and it looks like, oh, Cruisin' or what's that arcade cabinet game
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
like
Cruising USA.
just so lush and beautiful, made in Unreal Engine.
That
Like,
would be sick, frankly. Like, especially with like the whole like uh influence of like 90s design and like low poly and vaporwave. Like, I think you could make something that is like super fucking cool and fresh and stylish that
yeah,
wouldn't be like super expensive, and you could have be like a more budget title.
yeah, and it's just weird because like it feels like why does Nintendo ever need another racing game again? But like, and also like it's so dated, it's so 90s, but like I don't know. It would be like a fun small guy to just get out on the Switch, launch here,
I
something
dig it.
different. Yeah.
I definitely dig it. Steve?
I have one that's not necessarily well, it's not a game. It's GameCube games coming to Switch Online.
Okay, I like that.
That would be amazing. Yeah, more GameCube titles. They don't have to be remasters. Just get more stuff on there.
Yeah, I do kind of feel like they probably are going to be more inclined to just keep remastering them just because it seems to be a pretty lucrative way to make $70, but
I could see them being choosy though. Like, are you going to
yeah.
bother remastering Super Mario Sunshine when you already did it for the 3D All Stars collection, or did you just do what you did and put it online on Switch Online? You know, are
Yeah.
you going to remaster Animal Crossing when we've got Animal Crossing New Horizons, but people might want to play the
No, they won't.
original? Just
Well, they
shove it
haven't
on
done
Switch Online.
squat that's similar to Coliseum or Gale of Darkness, so there you go.
Exactly.
Package them, remaster 'em.
I mean, that would be great. I would love that. Okay. So, I've got a couple more. Um, one of them is like it feels like very lazy, but it's like it's a new IP, right? It's a new AAA IP.
I
That
had new IP done
I
on
want
mine as well.
that's definitely something I would want, right? Like I want like what's this generation's ARMS and
It's called Legs.
does it have a more staying power than ARMS? That would be great.
Legs.
You stick the Joy-Cons, you get 2 of the Ring Fit Joy-Cons and you kick your friends.
I want it.
I mean, who knows? But yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't have a pitch for what that IP is, but the point is I think, we get one new Nintendo IP per generation it seems now. So I
We
hope
got
there's
a
one.
couple this generation, if you count Labo and
I don't.
Game Builder Garage.
I don't. I don't count any of those. Let's be real. What a new franchise.
Yeah, would be nice.
All right, Sierra, what's next?
All right. Um, this is where it gets a little unserious because I started running out of ideas. Um, essentially a new Kirby title. But I couldn't figure out like what that looks like because like we got Forgotten Land not that long ago. Then they did the online multiplayer racing game. So
What about something like Air Ride? We could have like a new Kirby Air Ride.
like a new era, yeah. I mean, like I facetiously wrote Kirby robs the bank, but um
I like
something
I'm into that. I think that's I want to see something that is like more akin to Forgotten Land. So like I'm down for a Kirby heist game. Let's do that.
yeah, yeah. I
Kirby
when
meets
you put
Payday.
I I love that. You made my idea so much cooler.
So it's teamwork,
Yeah.
you know? You got
Mm.
another one, Steve?
Yeah, the last Nintendo published one I had on my list, I had a bunch of other games. Was Snipperclips 2. Because we've
That's a
never
good
What
got
a
one.
Snipperclips
throwback.
2. We had Snipperclips Plus, but I think a new Snipperclips would be cool. I think it did well for them. And that or one of their other little indie games that they published, like Good Job or The Stretchers, something like that. I could see them bringing out a title like that.
Nice. Okay, I have 2 more Nintendo ones, and I'll just go through them both quickly. One is a new Fire Emblem. We haven't gotten a new Fire Emblem since Three Houses. We got Engage, but that was like, a like anniversary retrospective kind of game, right? It's like not like a new proper entry. I feel like it would be great timing for another one. Three Houses obviously won a lot of new fans for the series. But if it's anything like that one with like how many branching paths it had and everything, like I'm imagining that's why it's taking so long because you're essentially making 3 entire campaigns for one game. So I just think it's time for whatever the successor to Three Houses is, because not only was that a game that brought a lot of new people into the franchise, it also made a lot of changes to the classic formula and kind of refreshed it and um you know added a lot of new systems and made some changes to the way battles work and everything. So I think just seeing them kind of follow up that game with the learnings from the first one is, that's what I'm looking for. And I think that's what makes the most sense next from them.
What was your other one?
Oh, right. New Super Mario Bros. All Stars. So I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about the Mario games, right? That aren't on Switch. And I think you just do a collection of the new Super Mario Brothers games remastered for the Nintendo Switch 2, and you call it New Super Mario Bros. All Stars, right?
And you
Because
can only buy it for 9 months?
I think you should probably keep it on sale for longer than that. But yeah, I think that's a one way you could go about it. Um, I don't know if that makes sense as a launch year game, but it is something that I thought was an interesting idea. And there is an anniversary for them coming up, so
I think they do that for the Mario 40th anniversary, personally, because we're
that could
gonna
be
have
good.
that in the Switch 2 life cycle. We did the 3D All Stars. Let's do the new Super Mario Brothers All Stars and do like that collection for the 40th.
Okay. Does anybody have any other Nintendo ones left?
No, not on my list.
Okay, cool. So, I know we came with like a couple third parties, but I think we ended up doing more Nintendo ones than we expected. So why don't we each do how about two of our third party pitches, and then we can make our final list.
Okay.
Okay. So I think one that would make sense would be a Bethesda title. I think you could go with Fallout 4 or Starfield. Personally, I don't know that it matters. I feel like you probably go with Fallout just because it's the more popular franchise, and it's
I,
obviously
I,
it's
I
having a
think so.
resurgence right now too.
But I had Fallout on my list, but it wasn't 4, it was 76.
Okay, I think that makes sense too. I think 4 is the more popular game, right? So that's what I would go with. But
But it's just very old at this point, and I feel like that could have ran on the Switch. It doesn't really show off the Switch 2 as a console, but
yeah, but I mean that was true of Skyrim, kind of, right?
and
Like that
maybe
was
with the next gen update, it'll be, enough, right? Because they've just put that update out that runs it at 60 and stuff.
Yeah, I think having like a game of the year edition where it's like all the DLC and it's the new upgrade and it's just like this is a definitive way to play Fallout 4 for Nintendo. I think just makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of those kinds of releases early on in the life cycle, and I think trying to leverage some of those kind of like well-known games that have never been available on a mobile platform
Mhm.
before, right? Exception of the Steam Deck now. I think it just makes sense.
I had a Bethesda title on my list, which is Doom: The Dark Ages. We've seen Doom
Oh,
do really well on Switch. I think they could easily bring the next Doom, which is Doom: The Dark Ages, due out in 2025, over to the Switch too, and I think it would do really well on there as well.
cool. That's a good one. Sierra?
Um, the creator of Stardew Valley has been working on another game called The
Mm,
Haunted Chocolatier. So, um, I do feel like maybe it might not make it for launch year for Switch 2, but I thought The Haunted Chocolatier would be like a really cool third party release to come out
totally.
next year.
I had that on
A
my
lot of
list
hype.
too. I think it's one of those things where I'm with you where I don't know that it makes it out next year, but like that would be sick. That would be
Yeah,
such a
that would
cool
be
show.
huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
because when Stardew Valley came to the Switch, that was a really huge deal. And then with the co-op.
Yeah. And it was like it continues to be one of the best selling games on Switch 7 years later. So, yeah, that would be a huge one. I don't know. That could be. That could be. Probably
I'd
not.
like it to be that,
I
or
want it to
it's going to
be.
be Silk Song at this rate. Like I thought Silk Song was coming out in
I had that
2024,
on
but
my
I could
list
I
too.
could see it being
Like
2025.
it
Ah,
really I think it could be,
I
right?
have
Like
completely scrubbed Silk Song from my consciousness. I'm like,
that's probably for the best.
Yes.
Okay, so for my last one, I'm gonna do the Plucky Squire. I know it
You don't think that's
Currently,
coming out this year?
I don't. It still says it's coming out in 2024, but it's also like doesn't have a release date, and we're halfway through the year. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could easily.
Like, neither does Dragon Age, but we spoke about that at
You're
length.
right, but I feel like that makes more sense. We talked all about that on Steam Deck podcast. I'm not going to relitigate that discussion, but Plucky Squire is like we've seen it so many times, and it feels very odd to me that you would have shown it at the Summer Game Fest suite of events and not announce a date if it was coming within the next 6 months. Just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's totally possible that that is the case, but I think it's far more likely that the game gets a delay and it's a Switch launch title.
Mhm. Switch 2 launch title, you mean?
Switch 2 launch title. Right. Thank you.
I could see it. I think, yeah, maybe. I think that one's still coming this year. There's a lot of games that were spoken about at Summer Games Fest and E3 that are still 2024, and we've not seen release dates for like Indiana Jones and the Obsidian game. I think the name escapes me right now.
Avowed.
Avowed, yeah. The other one on my list is GTA 6, and whether that comes to
You're crazy.
Switch 2 next year, we shall see.
Could happen.
It would be nice, but I would be so surprised. I would like to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it really depends on the technology angle, right? Like, is DLSSR like capable of keeping up with games like that enough that it can handle something like that? Because I mean, getting GTA Online on Switch would be like a huge win for them. So
Yeah,
I-
even if it's not like the full 6, like just getting the online portion of it on there would be absolutely massive. Being able to take that game wherever you want. Obviously it's the most popular game of all time at this point, so it's kind of crazy.
I mean, who knows? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to develop a mobile SKU to get people in that way, like the same way with Fortnite. So like maybe that does make sense. I don't know. It's interesting. I like that though. All right, Sierra, what's your last one?
A new Taiko no Tatsujin, which is the rhythm Taiko drum rhythm game.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll be.
I
It'll be a
have
fun
no
one.
idea how you spell that for the
TAIKO, right?
Taiko, no, and then Tatsujin is TATSUJIN.
No way, I got it right. I'm
Hell
not
yeah.
I'm so happy about that.
Spoken like someone who's been playing video games their
You know,
entire
you're
life. You hear a
gonna-
Japanese word and you're like, I can spell that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so before we wrap, Steve, how many Nintendo games did we end up with on our list?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 Nintendo games.
Okay. Do we want to trim a couple or should we just lock that in, you think?
I think I'm fine to look at. This is a wish list. This is what
Yeah.
we want in our year.
Okay, that works for me. I'm fine with that.
All right.
So then let's lock in the name. I'm thinking Nintendo Switch 2.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Okay.
I like Nintendo Snap though. Use it for something else. I think it. Switch and Snap go nicely together. Or swap. Switch and swap.
That's interesting. I feel like it needs to mean something though. Swap, I feel like what does that mean?
I swap between
Screens?
the couch and handheld. Yeah, swap
All right.
between screens.
All right. Okay. All right. I don't hate it. That's all right. We're locked in on release date, right? We said first week in April. I
Yeah.
think that's good. Price. Where do we want to land on that?
I think $4.29. If you two both think $3.99, I'm gonna let you two decide.
I think $3.99.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to go.
Okay.
All right, we're locked in. Is there anything else we wanted to I think that's it, right?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so our ideal situation is Nintendo Switch 2, $400, first week in April. Steve, read us through our games.
We have Metroid Prime 4, Pokemon Legends ZA,
ZA, yeah. I don't know.
ZA,
Yeah.
Mario Kart 9, a 3D Donkey Kong, a 3D Mario that's either a sequel to Mario Odyssey or New Super Mario World, Wind Waker HD, a Yoshi platformer, an Animal Crossing spin-off, Earthbound Remastered, Wave Racer, GameCube games on Switch Online, a new IP, a new Kirby Heist game, Snipper Clips, Fire Emblem, New Super Mario Bros. All-Stars, Fallout 4, Doom the Dark Ages, The Haunted Chocolatier, The Plucky Squire, GTA 6, and Taiko no Tatsujin.
There you go. I think that's a solid list. I think if you get half of
Yeah.
those games, that's a good launch year.
Massive launch here. We're forgetting 2, 3 Switch or whatever it's going to be called. 1, 2 Switch 3.
2,
That's
3
3,
Switch.
It's probably going to
4.
be it, you know?
3, 4, right? That's right.
Kool-Aid.
That would be so fucking funny. Oh my god, that's absolutely what they should have called that stupid horse game. Like, just own the bit, guys. All right, gang. Well, thank you guys for joining us here on 150 incredible episodes of Nintendo Noise. If you want to write in with your ultimate wish list for the Nintendo Switch 2's launch year, guess what? You can do that and much, much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you will find all the places that we are all over the web and all the ways that you can get involved in the community. However you choose to do so, thank you for joining us here on another episode of Nintendo Noise. For the crew, I've been Pete. She's been Sierra. He's been Steve. We'll see you next week. Love you. Bye.